Hello and welcome to the Social Jar podcast. I'm your host, Dan Wiseman, and this week we will be plucking 3 topics, as always, from the Social Jar, the world of social media that have piqued our interest this week. As always, I'm joined by Andres Georgiou and Ryan Long. How are we doing, guys?
Yeah, I'm great. I'm great. Thanks, you guys.
Not bad.
But so, as always, we'll be, as I said, bringing 3 topics from the Social Jar for you this week. But we're all big football fans here in this office, our producer especially. So this week, we thought we'd run something of a Euro 2020 special. We've been enjoying the tournament, guys?
Kind of. Yeah. I'm not going to lie. My hopes were right up there.
My hopes were here.
And I feel like I've been brought to ground.
Expectations and reality,
a bit.
isn't it?
Yeah.
When you watch teams like Italy, for example, and even the Netherlands, to be fair, you see that scoring prowess, and then you look at England at the same time, and it's just kind of a bit disheartening. But I think in terms of football quality, it's been tremendous getting to watch all these games. And what was the one we were talking about the other day, Dan? Denmark versus Belgium, I think, which was just amazing. That's like the first match I've ever listened to from start to finish on the radio. And the radio did it justice. Once I got, because I was driving, obviously, once I got to the destination, I texted you guys, I went, did that look as good as it sounded? And you said, yeah. And it was just amazing. Like, even with the radio, it was given, it was just making it feel like such a tense occasion. Every miss, every goal was just, perpetuated in terms of its importance. So I love that. That was the first time I've ever done that. It was really enjoyable, actually.
It's been good, and we've had loads of stuff going on in the office. Fantasy football, namely. How you find it, right?
Well, fantasy football.
Yeah.
Well,
What's the team name? Rush.
My name?
Yeah.
Vote for Rashford.
Vote for Rashford, of course, which is something we're actually going to come on to later. So something that caught your eye from the Euros, mate, is something that's now become quite infamous, is the Ronaldo and Coke incident, which sort of brought up a separate issue for you and the concept of athlete activism, didn't it?
Yeah, nice segue, by the way.
Yeah, did you enjoy
like
that?
that.
That was good.
So much better
Well
than the first
rehearsed.
time.
We're getting there, guys. So yeah, it's an interesting concept, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if anyone saw the whole incident with Ronnie. That's just a bit of a clue. Yeah.
What a well-placed prep.
That's the difference, isn't it, between us and Ronaldo? Whereas he promotes water, it's coffee that stimulates this office, isn't it?
No water in here, just in our brews. So with what Ronnie did, inadvertently, I think, is bring up this whole issue of athlete activism. Yeah, which is a term that's just been buzzing around a little bit recently because it seems to be quite prevalent in social media. We've seen the likes of Marcus Rashford doing amazing things. Not that he has to, he just wants to, doesn't he? Because he's been there in terms of having to deal with poverty, and he doesn't want anyone else to go through that same journey. He could just stick to his football, but he's using that as a platform to do... And
successfully so.
He
made a difference. He made a difference.
Massively.
Was it... Yeah, it was at the start of the year, wasn't it? During the lockdown phase.
During that first lockdown, yeah.
He'd regularly tweet out, so people would tweet him with the names of food banks and locations, and he'd retweet them saying, anyone in this area, this is where you can get food. So it's that sort of process of using their platform, and that's why Ronaldo moved those bottles of Coke, isn't it? It's for the image that they want to...
It's his image.
Yeah, on social media.
He doesn't want to be associated with sugary drinks. And I think that would be why.
For legal purposes, I don't think there's any sugar in Coca-Cola anymore. But obviously the sentiment is
yeah, he probably chiffed a load of Coke Zeros, didn't he? Did you see that with Paul as well? He moved beer, Heineken.
Yeah, the Heineken beer.
And they were alcohol free.
Well, I think
still,
It's the same thing though. It's about image, isn't it? It's about what do these things represent. And as you say, Ronaldo moves the Coke bottles and then holds up the bottle of water, which is Ronaldo trying to express his image as clean, healthy.
He's thinking very much like an Instagrammer, I think. He knows that shot of him is going to be seen probably as a still at some point, and there are going to be kids who look up to him that he feels responsible for, seeing him aligned with something he doesn't agree with entirely. Yeah. And so that's him thinking of that moment in time and how that might look to someone he to his fans, basically. And he's got a lot of them.
Out of context social I think you're absolutely spot on, because we've seen it where stills are taken of players, or photos that are out of context, or even memes that are made out of moments that are out of context, like Frenemy's podcast, which is now abruptly ended. But Trisha Paytas was saying at the end of that final episode is cut before I leave and walk off. Otherwise, I know I'm going to become a meme. And they didn't cut, and she became a meme. And that's just part of the culture, isn't it? You know, we could expect, maybe if Ronaldo didn't do anything, who knows? Maybe we wouldn't have seen an image of Ronaldo and Coke bottles prop up, because who cares really? You know, except for Coke, I guess. That's a big name to endorse their brand. But now that he did move the Coke bottles, it has become a meme, hasn't it? It has been like the meme is Ronaldo moving the Coke bottle.
Because there's money involved in it somewhere. Like Coca, apparently their shares dropped like dramatically, didn't they?
1.6%, I believe, yeah.
Which now is being contested, isn't it? It's not entirely sure whether Ronnie, as in Ronaldo.
Ryan knows him personally.
Good mate, Ronnie.
Personal basis.
Well, this is the second week that we've spoken about Ronaldo on this podcast, and I don't suppose it will be the last, just because of the army that he's backed by on social media. So it's across all platforms. More than 500 million people follow Ronaldo, who's Instagram's most followed person. I think he makes more money from social media than any other athlete. So do you feel that he wears that almost as a badge of honor, and that's why he's doing these things? Is because he's aware of the amount of people that follow him, the amount of people that take an interest on him, so his every move is therefore scrutinized?
I think Ronaldo knows first and
They don't have to take that mantle though, do they? You know, like they've been thrust into the spotlight so early on in their lives, like as footballers are, and to become a role model and just accept that and embrace it and run with it is really commendable. And we're seeing it a lot throughout sports. I think there's so many young athletes now who are just who are becoming role models. You know, like Naomi Osaka and what she's done recently in addressing mental health. You know.
Yep. And
for those who don't know, she was fined, wasn't she, for refusing to do press
media
coverage.
obligations.
Yeah,
post-match.
And because of the strain on her mental health. And that's her making a stand and getting people basically to see it in the same way we see other like injuries, you know. I mean, not necessarily an injury, but like a muscle strain or something like that. We're so much more accepting of something like that than mental health. And what she's done really has drawn so much attention to an issue that's very, very important.
Well, I think that's what the positive of social media is in this situation, is because it allows athletes, specifically if we're using this example, to champion their own causes, convey a personality online, and sort of stand up for things that they believe in, which would definitely have been harder before. And you sort of see, you know, Marcus Rashford is definitely the prime example of that, and how he used social media to put pressure on...
Vote for Rashford.
Vote for Rashford indeed, mate. To put pressure on the relevant parties to make sure that the right things were done in terms of feeding and extending the free school meals throughout lockdown. With Ronaldo, it's that sort of healthy eating, which we know he is sort of a figure for in terms of that sort of thing. And Naomi Osaka is a slightly different one, I feel, because it's something that she was suffering from personally. But that's what I think social is good for in this sense, is that it enables athletes to take a stand on issues like this, whereas before they may not have considered it possible to do so. I don't think without social media, Marcus Rashford can go and do what he did. So it's a sort of a plus point there for social media as a whole, I think, isn't it, really? That players and athletes feel that they have the platform to be able to do this.
Yeah, it's given everyone a voice. And, you know, people who don't have a massive following, you know, they're doing the same. You know, everyone feels now that they can have a voice for good. Except it's just that these athletes happen to have obligations, you know, to sponsorships, and that's where people start talking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why UEFA came out and threatened fines for anybody else moving stuff, because...
Yeah, it got crazy, didn't it?
Yeah, it's commercial at the end of the day. Like Coca-Cola are a major sponsor of the tournament, you know, and if we're going to be removing their product from, you know... look, we know, because we deal with that side of the business, that when you are pitching sponsorships, when you're pitching reach, they're taking into account Ronaldo's reach. When they're pitching these initial numbers to Coca-Cola and UEFA and vice versa. They need these big superstar athletes because that's what's going to generate the interest and the views. And to then say, yeah, actually, the athletes, if they want, can just remove the sponsorship or remove the branding. I can understand why UEFA would take a harsh stance on it, because it's commercial. It's about money at the end of the day. But it comes back to exactly what you're saying. Where is the line drawn between commercial and the individuality of what somebody actually represents? Because Ronaldo doesn't represent sugary drinks, like you're saying, Ryan. He promotes health. But UEFA, the tournament which he's participating in and representing, they advocate the opposite. So it's an interesting line, isn't it, in the world of marketing?
Well, I think the thing is Ronaldo is one example, but to use another one that you mentioned, sort of Pogba removed that bottle of Heineken because he's a practicing Muslim, and obviously that means that he doesn't drink alcohol. It was 0%, but the principle is there. It's a bottle of Heineken. So Ronaldo is moving it just on a sort of a personal lifestyle choice, whereas Pogba, it's religious ground, and so that conflict of corporate against sort of that religious angle, that could potentially get quite tense, couldn't it? Because I don't imagine there's any kind of deal that's going on between UEFA and Heineken that makes Pogba feel okay with that being there. So it's a tricky sort of debate, isn't it, really, as to what side of the fence that will fall on.
And look, it just depends where you sit, isn't it? It's like if you work in the industry that's based around acquiring sponsorships and commercial property and all this stuff, you're going to say, no, they need to meet their obligations. But if you're maybe a fan, or you're somebody that's on the activist side, like you're saying, Ryan, then no, the individual person should be able to decide what they individually represent. So it's definitely one of those tomato kind of things, because I don't think there really is like a definitive answer to what is the right thing to do.
So I think on that note, guys, we'll put it to you. Let us know your thoughts. Tweet us in at Uniform Brand, or if you're watching on YouTube, let us know your comments. What are your thoughts on the matter? How can you see this being resolved? And we'd love to get in touch with you and hear your thoughts. So yeah, drop them down below. So now, guys, sticking with the Euros, I'm going to present my topic to you guys, and it's a little bit more lighthearted than the previous topic. Don't worry about that. And it's about TikTok, who, as we move from one major sponsor in Coke and Heineken to another, are the first digital and social media platform to sponsor a major international tournament put on by UEFA. And if you've been on TikTok since the start of the tournament, as I imagine both of you guys have, you'll have seen a little Euro 2020 icon pop up on the side of your feed. And if you hadn't been on that, if you search for Euro 2020 in the search bar, it's amazing. It's this fully integrated sort of section of the app where you can check all the teams, all the scores. You can find every single game that's been played on the tournament. Click on that game, and in there pops up with all the highlights, the best skills, the best goals,
awesome.
Any moments.
It's all the stuff you look forward to, isn't it?
It's great. It's that sort of tournament experience, and you've got everything. It's from sort of the fan experiences, loads of different challenges to get involved with, where you pick your sort of dream five-a-side. Players are getting involved. So Genie Wijnaldum put together his like post-match playlist on the sounds section. It's a fan's, as someone that loves football and loves social media, it's an absolute dream. It's been so fun to get involved with. And for TikTok, who used to be sort of musically and was so sort of music and dance orientated, and that was for so long its background, it's a really interesting sort of facet to the app to show that they have this flexibility. And I think they've pulled it off really well.
Yeah, definitely. It's really well integrated, and it's a great user experience at the end of the day. And when it comes to tech, that's the most important thing. How can the users interact with it? How easy is it to use? And I think TikTok have done a tremendous job. And in terms of the actual content that's on there, there's some really interesting stuff, like behind the scenes and the camps, like you're saying, the highlights of the game, and then obviously all the other TikTok related content around those matches as well. But like you were saying, Dan, this is the first time we've seen something like that. And I would expect probably is going to be the gateway of definitely a lot more of this kind of social integration moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that it's the first time that we've seen a digital entertainment platform sponsor an international tournament, because it feels like these two things go so hand in hand, where fans...
Makes so much sense.
It does, exactly. When fans are looking perhaps more increased rate than they would during a normal football season in an international tournament, are just looking to engage with content of any kind. As we were talking about last week, you don't just watch the Euros for England, you watch it for all the teams. So I'll engage with content of any of the team in the Euros. And so it's like, I can't believe that it's...
North Macedonia.
Yeah, get involved. I can't believe that it's taken this long for someone to pick up that mantle and go, hey, like, there's something that really cool that we can run with this. And I think perhaps it's good that it's been TikTok first, because I think their platform and the nature of the community feel that TikTok provides sort of suits that.
Well, let's not forget, there's a reason why it's TikTok as well, because the demographic skews much younger compared to the other platforms in Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. So it's clearly being done by UEFA and by TikTok to target a younger sports fans demographic, and that's why I think it's really interesting, because if we're talking about power, then Instagram and Facebook have a huge amount of power, but why hasn't this been done before? And why specifically now is TikTok the right platform? And I think it just ticks all the boxes for UEFA of the audience that it's trying to reach. If we're looking at who's watching the matches on television, who's watching, match of the day highlights, who's listening to the radio, we don't have the numbers in front of us, but I'm pretty sure that would skew at a higher demographic. So UEFA and they're looking at it and going, how can we make this sport? Let's flash back to Perez with the Super League. How do we make this sport more accessible to younger people? And I think the TikTok deal is a stroke of genius, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke last week, right? This was like you getting on TikTok for you recently joined it. You join uniform and you think, right, now's the time. You've been doing the dances, haven't you? You've been getting involved with all the challenges.
What's this TikTok all about?
Exactly that. But you've got into it a good time, mate, because there's so much going on in there. And I think for sort of creators of TikToks, and even if you don't make TikToks, you can still go on there and just have so much fun. And it's just for creators and everything like that. It's a great place to work, generate ideas, and just see what everyone else is going on about. And I think we've seen some cool stuff from players too. And I think, as Andrea says, hopefully this is something we see perhaps a little bit more of going forward.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you though, that UEFA thing to begin with, I didn't know what that was. It was just like floating on the screen. I was like, what's that doing there? Hitting the X, getting rid of it. Took me a little while before I realised how good that was.
It's not just a pop-up ad, it's actually like this whole, But I think that was an interesting way to sort of introduce it, wasn't it? That little icon. I don't feel like it just appeared on feed. And so perhaps that's one thing that could be worked on, actually, is that they didn't really explain as you thought.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would have done that, isn't it?
That's the only problem.
Just got rid of that little floating icon. And I think that's the only thing that I can really caveat this with, perhaps, is that's something that maybe that UX that you were talking about earlier on could have been perhaps a little bit smoother.
But when you get it, when you click on it, it's just like,
it's great.
I click on this earlier.
It's great.
Yeah, my question about that is, obviously we know, well, we don't know, but we're guessing why they're doing that. We looked at the kind of content, we're looking at the experience of that. Who do you think will be next to try and get there? Because we know, look, social media it's a copycat industry.
Right, yeah.
Definitely. It's all about looking what others do and trying to implement that with yourself. Look at TikTok now. Every single platform has a TikTok variation, including YouTube, which we talked about in the last podcast with Shorts. Who's going to try the next major tournament, whether it's a World Cup or whether it's Rugby World Cup, Cricket World Cup? Which platform do you expect to try and make a move into that? It's got to be Facebook, surely.
I think for me, the one place when I'm watching a game, the first place I go to talk about the game is actually Twitter. Twitter and the nature of it, and that sort of that fast pace where when a game is going on, I still think that's the hub for everything that is sports related. And so I think it would be really cool to see. I think they're the only social media platform that haven't actually copied anything from TikTok yet. So I think it's probably due. I think it would be really cool because I think Twitter could put something cool together, because I still think, despite this amazing thing that TikTok have been doing, for me, when the game is live and I'm either contributing to it or seeing what other people are saying, I'm still going to Twitter first.
Well, Twitter technically are already doing it with topics. You can see that when you're engaging on, let's talk about, this Dan James is an example. If you're watching Wales play and people are using Dan James, even if he's not trending, if that topic can become available on Twitter. So there is technically an element of it, but I do agree with you actually, Dan. Like in real time, when it's talking about communication, you're doing two things. You're on WhatsApp messaging your friends, or you're on Twitter seeing what's going on there. It's all about the reaction. Like when England were playing Scotland, my first instinct when I was thinking, this is trash, but I want to make sure that everyone else believes this is trash as well. Let me check Twitter. and it's also a validation of opinion as well. So, yeah, I think Twitter, with that discussion, you're right, it's the place to go. But in terms of multimedia, they haven't found a way to integrate that really well, have they?
No, I mean, as you were saying, I mean, when I'm watching England-Scotland as an example, my perpetual tweets for Southgate out, hashtag Southgate out, are directed at one platform in particular, and that is Twitter. And I think Facebook would be a really cool one, actually. And I think because of the sort of their sister platforms and the other things they could sort of stretch it out onto, I think that would be quite a cool idea, actually. And I think, as you sort of touched on at the top, TikTok has definitely, I feel like they've really cracked open a nut here, and other social media platforms are really going to want a piece of that pie, because it's such a cool place for creators, and where you sort of see creators and players acting as one and contributing to the same platform and the same domain. And as you were saying, I do think that's something that hopefully, I say hopefully, that we see a lot more of in the future, because as a fan, it's exactly what you want, isn't it?
Proves your experience.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was my topic for the week, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm a big football and social media fan, as you both know, so you can imagine my excitement when I first saw that on the TikTok feed. Guys, if any of you have TikTok, football fan or not, I'd really advise you to go and check it out. It's such a cool space where, as I said, creators, players, managers, pundits, they're all getting together in one really cool spot where you can engage with the tournament in a way like I don't think we've ever really seen before. So that's perhaps the tip of the week for the podcast, is go and check that out. It's a load of fun. So, last but not least, we have Andreas, and your topic from the social jar this week, the last dive into the jar. What you got for us?
Yeah, we need like a da-da-da-da-da, and then we will get a physical jar. I feel that's what's missing.
Yeah.
The social jar
the set
podcast.
and the jar.
Why don't we call it social jar?
Maybe a jar.
Yeah. But yeah, my topic for this week, guys, is actually related to podcasts and related to audio. And that is Twitter Spaces this week, which is obviously this revolutionary new tool. I wouldn't say new tool, but it's a revolutionary tool which Twitter have integrated into their platform, which allows users to live stream audio rooms, which can have a multitude of guests in there, on stage and off stage, derived from the Clubhouse idea, which we saw become very popular during lockdown. But this week, Twitter has announced that users will be able to download their Twitter Space room after the completion of the broadcast, essentially. And I think what's really interesting about that is, with the popularity of Clubhouse previously and with Spaces now, I think we're seeing a shift when it comes to how users want to consume audio, because podcasts, we all know, are a big part of a lot of people's daily lives and routines. There are so many huge shows like Joe Rogan Experience, which is just for one guy sat there talking whatever he wants to be one of the biggest shows in the world. It's just crazy to think about. But there's so many different elements to podcasts that people love. And Twitter Spaces and Clubhouse has kind of been used as a supplementary feature, essentially. Like after the podcast, the host might jump on a Twitter Space and, engage with their audience, discuss some of the elements from the show, which has been really, really well used by a number of podcasters. But now that Twitter is saying, you know what, we want to give more value to this platform, why don't you do your podcast on Twitter Spaces, download it, and then you have the option, if you want to upload it to your RSS feed, upload it to Spotify, iTunes, etc. You can now do that. And I think that's really, really interesting, because it's almost trying to reverse how the current trend is, which is Twitter Spaces is just used as kind of like an audio throwaway room. That's the one thing about Clubhouse I've thought so many times, is I've been in some really interesting rooms, but then it's gone. Or if you missed the beginning of the room, you can't catch up, you can't rewind. And that's one of the things that I feel has let the user experience of it down. But now with this, it basically makes every single room, if you want it to be, a podcast episode in itself. And it gives the podcast host the opportunity to engage with their audience in real time, live, something you can't do with a podcast. You have to listen, and then if you want to engage with the show, you've got to go tweet your thoughts afterwards, like we've asked you all to do on today's show. So I really do think it's interesting times, and I'm very kind of cautious to see what's going to happen with this, because I think live podcasting is going to become more and more important. Now the technology is there, and I think more podcasters are going to want to jump on board with that. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. I mean, even UEFA for the Euros, they did their preview show live on Twitter Spaces, and we know a lot of football clubs, Manchester City, in the basketball world, the New York Knicks. I nearly said Giants there. I don't know why. New York Knicks. They use Spaces as a great way to let fans interact with senior executives, with managers, with players, and it's just amazing. And that's always going to give that level of engagement that you can't get with a podcast. You can't feel like you're part of the show, and that's why I genuinely think that this may be the transitional period now of what the new era of podcasting is.
Well, I think the one thing that's most interesting from that, and I think what we're seeing is that Spaces and Clubhouse, they have a much higher ceiling. There's more scope for evolution than there is in normal regular podcasts. I mean, like podcasts, as we know, as we are currently recording, as they always have been, there isn't too much scope for change and for up-leveling. Whereas with Spaces, as you said, with them being now available for download, with more platforms making their sort of take on the matter, like we've seen Spaces do with Clubhouse, there is so much more scope for them to constantly evolve that idea and run with it than there is with normal podcasts, which, you know, are still hugely successful in their own right and continue to be. It's not like they're dying out. Podcasts are on an upward trajectory at the moment, aren't they still?
Yeah, no, the statistics are there, the numbers are there. The podcast industry, it's thriving. You know, year on year, it's up in terms of revenue that podcasts are generating. So we can't say that podcast is dying, and that's not the point I'm trying to make. What I'm trying to say is that there's this new experience available now that's empowering the live broadcast, the radio of old, essentially. You know, that's why radio was so good. You know, before televisions were really popularized and before satellite, is you call in and you're part of the show. You know, you can let your point be heard. And that, like, let's not kid ourselves. Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces, it's just radio, but more accessible because everybody's got a mobile phone, you know, and everybody can be a part of that. But think of this, to be part of your favorite show, you know, Joe Rogan Experience, let's just say, if someone said to you, you can be a part of that show, you know, as a fan, you'd be like, yeah, what do I have to do? We just log in to Twitter Spaces. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting. And it's also empowering podcast creators, isn't it? Because even if you didn't want that to be your podcast, now that it's allowing you to download it, you've got that supplementary content that you can use on your channel. You can either use it as a podcast, you can use it as micro content across your channel, which is great. You know, the more content you can create, the better. Yeah,
so I think, how would you feel about doing a live Social Jar Twitter Spaces, Rye?
Bring it on.
Yes.
I think we can't give you a live mic.
I think it's like, if you can connect or like just find ways to connect with your audience, that's got to be a great thing, isn't it? You like to see and hear real time what people think. I mean, could be a bad thing, but like it could be a good thing.
It's true, isn't it?
And how mint is that?
I think, especially as you mentioned, for like sports clubs in particular, that opportunity for fans, you know, when they get like previous club legends on or something like that, and you've got the opportunity for fans to sort of have that experience where they get to put a question to their long-time idol or whatever. I think clubs have a potential now to really tap into that dynamic, and I think what you have there is an interesting, because fans will always want to do that. You know, if Man United say Ryan's man Marcus Rashford, if they're saying we're doing a Twitter space, Marcus Rashford's going to be there, you know, put your questions to Marcus. Ryan's there in a heartbeat. I already know it. Vote for Rashford. He's going to be detailing his full political campaign. But no, it's true, whereby fans are going to be hugely interested in that sort of thing. And I think for that, when you've got that emotional tie, particularly, it's an interesting thing where I think those kind of organisations can really run with that concept.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like, right now, probably not, but over the next 12 months, we're really going to see what the power of Twitter Space. And I personally prefer Spaces over Clubhouse. The exclusivity thing of Clubhouse was cool to start with. Yeah, you've got to get an invite to get in. Bore off. Seriously.
It quickly felt like a hindrance, didn't it, really?
Well, it is a hindrance, because I had an account on an iPhone, and it's pretty much made it almost impossible, or very difficult at least, to move that over to my Android phone. So, terrible user experience. Lives too long on the whole idea of being exclusive. Let's not forget, it wasn't even on Android for the longest of time anyway. It was pretty much exclusive to iOS.
By which point most people, like yourself, were just
fed up
Probably
of
done
it,
with
and
it, yeah.
Twitter Spaces had already launched. So, I think Spaces, this is the first step of them moving to make it a more important part of the platform. And as you see with Fleets, top of your screen, and now Spaces are at the top of your screen when you go into that Twitter menu as well. So it's definitely going to be a big part for Twitter, and I'm really liking the direction that they're going in with this to give the power to the audio hosts.
So again, more and more people are having new ways of having a voice.
Absolutely.
And it's just changing so much so quickly. So we were saying, weren't we, like how much is it going to change by the time the next big tournament comes along? And
yeah, definitely. I
the
think
World Cup isn't even 4 years away. Like,
it's
1 year
yeah,
away.
next year, isn't it?
Year and a half, basically. Yeah.
so things might change loads still by then.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. I think even since it went live, we've seen Twitter Spaces evolve so quickly. There's already, they're already making these changes to it to make that next step. And so you're right in saying that in a year's time, we'll probably have a better idea of where the ceiling lies for Twitter Spaces. But it's really cool, actually. And I think that's a good point to make. And I think I think podcasts and the industry, as we were saying, is definitely safer now, and Clubhouse and Spaces definitely aren't going anywhere. But in the years to come, as we get a bit further down line, that sort of conflict and seeing where the general populace tends to lie on that spectrum is going to be really interesting. Yeah. So let us know, guys, what do you prefer? Do you prefer Spaces, Clubhouse, or is there no school quite like the old school? Do you like your podcasts as we've always known and loved them? Let us know at Uniform Brand or in the comments your thoughts on that. So, guys, I think that's it. It's been emotional. Episode 2 of the Social Jar. I think that's the jar empty for yet another week.
Yet again, yeah.
Good to have you guys on. How are we feeling?
Yeah, good.
Getting
Just
good?
feeling nervous about the football. England in particular. My
Yeah.
prediction, still stands. So.
Yeah, I think I've been really impressed by O'Donnell. I think we need to talk about this on the podcast.
O'Donnell from Motherwell.
It's been fantastic.
Roll the VT. Yeah. But, it was, great predictions by Infinity Studios footballing exec Josh Woods, which you can watch on our channels. So, enjoy the football, enjoy the Euros, and we'll be back again in a couple of weeks with another Social Jar, right, Dan?
Yeah, that's the plan. It's been really good fun. Thank you to everyone at home that's been watching. We really appreciate your support, and we'll see you in just a couple of weeks.